So hopefully you can now see my presentation.
I see your screen, but I see it's black. Are you seeing the same thing,
Yeah,
Katie?
I can see the same. Hold on, let me try again. We love some tech difficulties to start any presentation. Okay, I think we're good now. Would you mind just confirming you can see that?
Yes, I can see
Amazing,
it.
brilliant, excellent. Thank you. Well, if anything goes wrong, just feel free to unmute and let me know, and then I can just double check we're all good. But I think we're good to start. So thank you everyone for joining me today. So just to move on to my next slide, just to introduce myself quickly. So my name's Katie Mathers. I'm a senior commissioning editor for social sciences on Emerald's books programme. I've been at Emerald for 5 years, and since 2020 I've been commissioning for Emerald's sociology and criminology books programme. So while I'm the lead on our social sciences programme, I specifically commission in sociology and criminology. And I've just listed some of my areas of commissioning interest on screen, just to kind of give you a flavour of the kind of things, the kind of areas and subdisciplines that I commission in. But Emerald, as a house on our books programme, we commission and publish across the social sciences and business. So on the social sciences side of our programme, we commission, as I say, in sociology and criminology, also in education, what we call science and society, so kind of more health and social care, media and communication studies. And then over on our sort of business side of our programme, we commission in business management, economics, finance, and kind of all of the subdisciplines that go along with those areas. So from the point of view of the whole programme, we commission and publish quite broadly across those areas. So just on to the next slide. So just to talk through a little bit more about Emerald before I get on to the kind of books commissioning and publishing process. So Emerald, we were founded by academics. So this was back in 1967, a group of management academics found that they didn't really have an outlet for publication that really fit the kind of work that they were doing, which was more kind of practice based. And so they launched their own journal, which was kind of the start of Emerald Publishing as it is today. So our main focus is on real impact. So we do a lot of work with our authors on what that means and how we achieve real impact with the research that we publish. We are ambassadors for applied SDG focused research. So we signed the SDG Publishers Compact back in 2020, and we were kind of founding signatory. And since then, we have structured kind of all of our commissioning and publishing efforts around the SDGs within 4 SDG aligned mission areas. So those are quality education, fairer society, responsible management, and healthier lives. So those are kind of mission led areas that we kind of commission and publishing across both our books content, our journals content. So that's kind of a broad vision that we have for the way that we see a kind of more interdisciplinary approach to research and what that means for impactful research. We're also a signatory of DORA, which is the Declaration of Research Assessment. So that's looking at different ways of measuring the kind of spread and impact of research, so beyond traditional metrics such as citation counts, and kind of widening that view of what it means to do impactful research. So that's just a little bit about Emerald. So moving on to the focus of today's session, which will be around our books publishing programme and really a guide to getting your book published. So just to start briefly in terms of the different book formats that we publish and what this might mean for anybody that is considering a book proposal. They could fall into any of these formats. So first of all, you have what you would call your sort of standard traditional scholarly monograph. So these tend to be between 60 and 90,000 words. And it's really a space for a written, detailed written study that focuses on a quite specialist area or of a specific subdiscipline. And these can either be single authored or co-authored. Or they could also take the form of an edited collection, so where you're bringing together a group of chapter authors around a specific theme. On that kind of that same wavelength, we also publish monographs and edited collections in specific series. So within our books programme, we have a lot of standalone series that focus on a specific subdiscipline within the kind of the areas that we publish in. And we do welcome monograph and edit collection proposals for those series. And those can all be viewed on our Emerald Bookstore if anyone's interested at looking at the series that we do publish. We also publish a format called Emerald Points. So that is usually in the range of 30 to 50,000 words. So it is a short form format for our books programme. And what's quite unique about Emerald Points is it publishes on a rapid publication schedule. So whereas the majority of our books would publish on a 6-month production schedule, Emerald Points would publish within 3 months of the final manuscript going into production. So it's really an opportunity to respond to quite fast-moving, topical areas where you really need to have that really kind of quick response to something that is kind of really timely. So given the nature of that series, because it is short form, it means that we are able to support that rapid route to publication. And then finally, we also publish handbooks. So large edited collections, essentially, so usually 30 or more chapters that are really sort of seen as comprehensive and authoritative works on topics across the areas that we publish in. So really kind of defining a subdiscipline, either in a really kind of established area or maybe a burgeoning field of research. So just on the next slide, I've just got here a general overview of the process of publishing a book. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to focus mainly on the kind of first few steps in this kind of flow chart. So mainly around writing and submitting a book proposal, the kind of next steps in terms of having that proposal peer reviewed, and looking at responses to peer review before then moving to the stage of offering a contract to publish a book. But this is just a general overview to see those additional steps that would come after that point. And I'm very happy to share these slides after this session. So if anyone does want a copy of this infographic, then they're happy to have that. Happy to make that available to anyone who does want to look at it. But as I say, I'm going to focus more on the first few steps of this flowchart, which is around writing and submitting a book proposal. So getting to the book proposal form itself, which is the first step in terms of pitching a book project idea to a publisher. So you'd be working with a commissioning editor like myself, and I'll talk a little bit later on in terms of how do you go about finding an editor, how do you select which publisher to work with, but once you've got to the point where you are in contact with an editor, they're going to talk to you about submitting a book proposal. So I'm just going to briefly go through the kind of questions that you would be expected to answer in a book proposal form, which are relatively standard across publishers that you work with. Because while this, obviously are the questions that we ask at Emerald, it's a very standard set of questions that you would expect to receive from any publisher that you were looking at submitting a book proposal to. So first of all, we'd want information just about yourself, so kind of bibliographic information, your name, your affiliation, and a little bit about your publication history, so we can understand, you know, if you do have a publication history in the area that you're looking to submit a proposal to us for, and just understand kind of what your writing experience has been so far. So have you published any books before? Would this be a first-time book project? And just getting a sense of where kind of your area of expertise lies. Of course, we want to know lots of information about the book. So we ask questions like what is the title or a tentative title of the book itself. We ask for both a short and long description. So the idea being that a short description would really get to the heart of the kind of aims and scope of the book in a really quick couple of sentences, and then giving you that space in a longer description to really get into the meat of kind of what you know, what the book will be delivering, what will readers expect to benefit from reading that book. We'll also get into things like unique selling points, so really a set of kind of bullet points of really what are those new contributions that the book will be making to your area of research or the subdiscipline that you're working in, and what readers would benefit that really they, you know, isn't currently in the literature today. So that's really getting to the heart of what's new in the book project that you're proposing. We also ask for a table of contents. So that's getting a full understanding of the kind of chapter structure. And we also would ask for chapter abstracts, so kind of 50 to 100 word descriptions of each chapter. So really not only seeing that overall structure, but really kind of getting down into the heart of what each chapter would be delivering, and really trying to understand that overall narrative, you know, from an introduction right the way through to a conclusion, and seeing how each chapter is kind of building into that narrative and kind of you know, weaving into this overall storytelling. So that's really important for any publisher, is getting not only a list of chapters, but those chapter descriptions as well. We'll then ask you for your thoughts on the market and competition for the book. So who would the audience be? Are there any competing titles? I'll talk to this a little bit more later on, but these are really important sections for really us understanding where you see the book fitting within the current literature, and again getting back to that sense of you know, unique selling points. What new contribution would the project be making, and also how it sits within the current literature and the titles that are already available. You know, even if there's not a direct comparison, there will always be you know, comparable titles that we would ask you to tell us a little bit more about, and kind of reflect on what your book or project is doing that project maybe isn't. So that's kind of a really important part of the proposal for us. We'd then ask you for thoughts on the format and length. So things like your tentative word count, any idea on how many tables and figures you'd be using, if you have any sample material available. So for example, a draft chapter that we could send out with the proposal form itself. Oh, sorry, I'm just hearing a bit of feedback on the line. Was that a question or? No. Okay. I'll continue, but if anyone does have any questions, I will leave some time at the end for questions if anyone does want to ask any questions. So yeah, and then moving forward, we also ask questions at the end around sales and marketing, meaning kind of an understanding of your platform as the author of the book proposal. So kind of any networks that you have that you could use to promote the book and things like that. That's not something that we would really kind of judge the next steps of the proposal on, but it's really helping us to get an understanding of any networks that you do have that you would be able to utilise to promote the book once it was published. So it's really great to have as much detail as possible in that section of the book proposal right from the get-go, because it always builds an understanding of where there are those networks that we can tap into in terms of getting the book to the right places and what, getting an understanding of who those potential readers might be. And then finally, we do also ask for any review recommendations. So as I talked to before, the next, in terms of submitting a book proposal, of course, it would come to a commissioning editor such as myself first, just for that initial kind of internal editorial review. But the next step after that would be a formal peer review process of the proposal. So we do always ask for recommended reviewers, particularly if it's a really kind of maybe kind of niche topic area where there might be a smaller pool of reviewers, and we really want to make sure we're asking the right experts for their opinion. But we do also use our own kind of database of reviews as well. So just because you've suggested a reviewer doesn't mean that that person would be used as a reviewer, if that makes sense. So just moving forward, I just wanted to get into a couple more key points in terms of things to consider when you are looking at submitting a book proposal. So this slide's really just an insight into what we as commissioning editors would be thinking about when we're first looking at a proposal when it comes through to us. So we're looking at seeking to support and publish impactful research. So we specifically with what I talked about earlier in terms of being a very kind of SDG aligned publisher, which more and more publishers are interested in seeing research come through that really does have that resonance with the SDGs and also has a clear kind of sense of doing real world impact in communities. We really want to see that sense of kind of fresh thinking and a representation of diverse voices and views. So looking at addressing key challenges or issues facing society, industry or policy. So it's really for us is a sense of having a clear kind of mission-led approach to your area of research. And I think that sense of what is the new contribution that this project is making. Is it either fresh cutting edge research, or is it a new take on an area that hasn't, not anybody really kind of ever taken that approach before. So it's really looking at what that kind of new contribution is to the literature. Equally, we want to see a sense of international coverage. So especially, for example, if you were proposing an edited collection, we'd want to see, in terms of the chapter authors, we'd want to see international coverage, so that we would seeing perspectives, from kind of regions and nations around the world, and that particularly for a topic area that does have that global relevance, and thinking about any book project as having a potentially global audience. We really want to see, particularly in an edited collection, that all of those perspectives are coming through, and that it does feel like those international perspectives are both included in the project, but also that the book is being written with an international audience in mind. And again, looking at supporting growing subdisciplines. So a lot of editors, specifically in Emerald, but beyond, are really looking at championing research that is coming from burgeoning areas of research, or, as I say, offering a new approach to established areas of research. So that's just a quick roundup of some of the thoughts that are going through commissioning editors' heads when they are looking at a proposal for the first time. So just some more practical tips on this slide. So it probably sounds quite obvious, but read the form really carefully. So in the proposal form, there is just a lot of information that publishers and reviewers, so bearing in mind that the proposal will not only be looked at by the publisher that you're submitting it to, but also the peer reviewers. It really needs to feel like it's comprehensive and rigorous enough and has enough detail to really be ready for that next stage in terms of peer review. And so we really need to see full answers and answers that really engage with the heart of the question that is being asked in the proposal form. But that is why the kind of author and editor relationship is really important. So for any proposal that comes to me, you know, I will make sure that I feel that the proposal is kind of as detailed and comprehensive enough as it needs to be before it moves to that peer review stage. So while you can of course rely on your commissioning editor to provide that feedback, it's great to be at that really strong stage right from the get-go when you are first submitting the proposal. So again, you know, detail. Any proposal that just looks short, even kind of visually, or looks incomplete, you're off the bat, it feels like it isn't fully formed yet. So as it says here, better to write too much than too little. So if you're worried you've not provided enough detail, it's, as it says here, it's better to kind of provide as much detail as possible rather than have that sense that the proposal is lacking. And it's something that your editor can work with you on in terms of making sure the proposal hits the right mark, considering the next step would be going to a formal peer review process. And then this is a really important one, is connecting your work to the field. So in the book proposal form, we will ask you about kind of the relevant subdisciplines. So not just in terms of level, but in terms of those different research areas, who really is the audience for this project. And making sure that the proposal feels in touch with that is really important. So as it says here, common feedback comments by reviewers will focus on maybe a lack of referencing or connection to existing work. So the proposal really needs to feel kind of in touch with the current literature, especially if you're writing in a really well-established field. It needs to feel like you're really kind of connected to those existing works and able to view those with a view of saying, well, this is what the new contribution my proposal is making. So it really feels situated in that area, but also there's a sense of what the proposal is doing that is offering something new as well. So just a quick note specifically on the description part of the proposal form, which is really important because it is the main way that both commissioning editors and reviewers are getting access to understanding what the aims and scope of your proposal are. So you want to be clear and concise and avoid too much jargon in your short summary. So that needs to be a really kind of clear and accessible, quick, you know, at a glance understanding of what any reader coming to this book is going to be taking away from reading it. And again, I feel like I've said the word detail a lot in this presentation, but giving as much detail as you can in both the longer description and in your chapter by chapter summaries is so important for helping both your editor and external peer reviewers understand the approach and the kind of how the argument you're making is developing right from, as I say, the introduction to the conclusion. And so, yeah, proposals that provide really clear chapter descriptions that are really clearly linked to the central thesis of your book, and it really feels like each chapter is offering a contribution to that overall narrative. We often see much more kind of constructive peer review comments. And yeah, just as it says here, if you are proposing an edited book and you don't yet have all of the chapters lined up, we'd still want to see kind of a list of potential authors and topics, and a commissioning plan of how you'd intend to secure contributions. So with an edited collection, we'd still need to really be able to understand that sense of structure and what each chapter would be offering, even if there is still some work to do in terms of securing potential chapter contributions. And it's really important just to make sure that your understanding of the purpose of the proposal and the project comes through. So what is your research doing that is extending and understanding beyond what is already available in the literature? And as I said on the previous slide, as much detail as possible is the best way to go. And then you can potentially edit down from there. but there really needs to be feel like there's a sense of real building towards, you know, an overall argument, and that each chapter is contributing to that narrative. And then, just as I said earlier, that I'd come back quickly just to the market and competition section. So a really good piece of advice is to be realistic with regards to the potential market. So no book can appeal to all markets. So it's important, even if you do think there are multiple potential audiences, maybe to highlight a primary and secondary audience. But often, you know, if we see proposals that you know, are ticking every box in terms of reaching out to multiple wide-ranging audiences, it doesn't feel realistic, and it feels like maybe the proposal is missing the mark in terms of you know, which audiences it can potentially reach, and you know, that's potentially a missed opportunity to really kind of take ownership of that primary audience. So as I said before, also listing potential competing titles is really important, both for us understanding yours as the author's understanding of the kind of the literature that's already available in that field, but also getting to that point of why your proposal and your book is distinct from those competing titles. So being able to kind of say, this is the contribution that this book makes, however, then reflecting on kind of what your proposal will do that those, you know, competing titles potentially don't, is really helpful for both editors and peer reviewers to kind of really understand what the contribution the book is would be making to the field. And yeah, as it says here, saying that there is no competition to your book is not helpful, and is in most cases very unlikely to be the case. So you know, if you are working in a very kind of maybe specialist area of research, while there might be not be kind of completely directly competing title, there will always be you know, comparable titles that do maybe take a similar approach or cover a similar geographic region, something like that. So being able to pick those out and highlight kind of your understanding of the contribution that that book's making, and then reflect on your own project in comparison, is really important. And yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about titles, because I think that can feel like something that is quite challenging when submitting a book proposal, is that, you know, how do you select the overall main title for the book? What are the important things to be aware of? So just to list a few things here, you want to be clear and concise. So you want something that really reflects the content, but and includes things like keywords that are kind of really search friendly. So if you're thinking about what people would be potentially typing into, for example, Google Scholar, you really want to get those keywords into the title. But there's a balance between that and having and being, as I say, clear and concise. So you need to have that balance between keyword search friendly, but something that you know, kind of gets to the heart of the aims and scope of the book in a really concise way. A phrase that introduces the book. So if, for example, you were writing something that's in kind of maybe introducing a new concept, or you know, something that has a really kind of a phrase that is going to be really identifiable and resonate with the book, then that obviously needs to go in the title. So really thinking about what are those takeaway phrases that really need to be captured in the main title. And it's really going to be kind of instantly identifiable. So, you know, if you think about readers coming at your book from outside of your own perspective, so, you know, perhaps not going to be kind of that subject specialist, but interested from, you know, the point of view of being in that kind of relevant subdiscipline that the book might appeal to, what will be really identifiable to them in terms of understanding what that book might offer to them in terms of benefits for the reader. So it's a hard balance to strike, but it's something where all of these things are going to help in terms of understanding what that right title is, and it's something that your commissioning editor can help with. you know, titles can change. When you're submitting a proposal, the title that you submit the proposal with doesn't have to remain the same, but it's really important at the proposal stage, just so that, you know, editors and peer reviewers that are coming to the proposal can look at that title and get kind of that immediate understanding. But that discussion around title can go on from the proposal stage, so it doesn't have to be kind of a hard and fast decision, but it's really important for that proposal stage just to be able to communicate that those key kind of identifiable kind of takeaways that the reader would be benefiting from picking up the book. And then I just wanted to include a quick slide on co-authorship. So there are lots of benefits to co-authorship. So obviously having that opportunity to collaborate, to learn from peers. Often we see stronger submissions when a book is co-authored, especially maybe from a team of first-time authors, because you have that opportunity to collaborate within a group. But equally, on the flip side to that, you cannot sometimes see that when multiple people have contributed to a proposal, maybe it can feel disjointed if you know, you've got, you know, a team of people that are taking on ownership of different parts of the project. So while you know, I just wanted to kind of raise that in terms of if you were looking at submitting a co-authored proposal, you really want to make sure that you still have that kind of synergy that you would see in a single authored work, in terms of taking ownership of that overall coherency and kind of narrative and storytelling that you would want to see in a book proposal. So just some kind of final tips, just to kind of reiterate what I've already said, but in a kind of really quick few takeaways. You really want to make sure that you're kind of taking care of that overall narrative. So summarizing and concluding, equally having an introduction that would kind of set the scene, but then coming, you know, leading up to a conclusion that's going to bring us back to the main argument and present key conclusions and recommendations. Particularly if you've got a piece of research that's really solutions focused, your conclusion is going to be really important in terms of really kind of hammering home to the reader, okay, what are the next steps, what have we learned, and looking at that kind of sense of impact, which is really important. Again, looking at that question of if you are stating any kind of recommendations, or maybe a new framework that can be applied in practice, your conclusion is the right place to do that, and you really want to make sure that that's coming through in your proposals. So particularly in your chapter abstract, for example, in the conclusion, you really want to have an understanding of what kind of that takeaway for the reader will be. You know, once they get to the end of the book, what are those kind of implications, either in practice or for further research. And you can then also look at maybe addressing any limitations of your research as a part of that. So, you know, based on the learnings that have come from your project, what are the possibilities for further research and what more needs to be done. In terms of things not to do, you want to really caretake, as I say, this overall narrative. So certainly in a book proposal, if there are any kind of maybe contradictory statements or elements that feel like they're not kind of contributing to the kind of overall narrative that you've established in the same way, those are things that are going to be picked up by peer reviewers. And you don't want to, in terms of your overall structure, you don't want to maybe start a new topic or introduce new material that feels like it's not been established at the start of the book. So that's really just about kind of being a caretaker of making sure that there's a real kind of overall narrative flow, and that is reflected in the book proposal. So just quickly talking about the peer review process. So all book proposals at Emerald go through a single blind peer review process. So that means that the reviewer would know the author's identity, but the author wouldn't know the reviewer's identity. And that's because we ask reviewers to reflect on the kind of author profile. So, is that person equipped to write a book on that particular topic or within that subdiscipline? And that's a really important part of having a book proposal peer reviewed. And as I say, while I say that that's what happens at Emerald, that's very standard across publishers that you would work with, is a single blind peer review process. As I said earlier, we may use reviewers that you've suggested yourself, or we may draw on our own list of contacts. And we aim to send you feedback within 4 to 6 weeks. So we tend to ask reviewers to return reviewer feedback within sort of 3 or 4 weeks. So usually in an ideal world, from confirming that the proposal will be going out for peer review, we would have some peer review feedback within sort of 1 to 2 months. Subject to kind of reviewer availability and kind of timescales for returning review, but that's kind of a general benchmark in terms of timelines. And just a kind of a quick insight into the questions that we ask reviewers. So we send them a review questionnaire, which has a kind of list of questions that we ask them to respond to. And we also ask them at the end of that questionnaire to provide a sort of overall recommendation. So that would vary from strongly recommends to revise and resubmit. But in terms of the majority of the review questionnaire would be questions that we're asking them to provide kind of detailed comments in response to, so we can really get an understanding of kind of what they think are the strengths and weaknesses of the proposal. So just to kind of go through some of those questions really quickly, we asked them to kind of write their own synopsis for the work. So kind of based on their reading the proposal, what have they understand to be the main ideas in the work? What makes it original or thought-provoking? So that's really getting into the heart of that question of what new contribution is that project making to the literature. What is their view of the research content? What do they think that the research is contributing to the field? Does it feel like a comprehensive proposal? Are there any really kind of clear areas that have been missed that really need to be addressed in a proposal that's looking at that particular area? What do they see as the strengths and weaknesses? What is their view on the structure that is proposed? So specifically looking at the table of contents, is there anything that stands out to them in that structure that feels like it's misplaced, or if it needs to go somewhere else in that narrative? If the work is edited, does it feel like a comprehensive coverage of the topic, and does it feel coherent as well? I think that's something for edited collections that we're really keen to understand from a reviewer's point of view, whether the collection itself feels like it's while it's eclectic and diverse, is it bringing together a kind of sense of an overall narrative, and is that work being done, for example, in the introduction and conclusion, to really bring those chapters together? And then we just ask them for any additional thoughts or recommendations. So that's a kind of really kind of area where they can freely write anything that perhaps hasn't been captured in the review questionnaire. But this, with the way that this is structured, we tend to get some really, really rich and detailed feedback on our book proposals, and it's always a really useful process for authors in not just understanding, the strengths of their proposal, but what they can work on. And with the comments that we do see come in review questionnaires, they're always written, in a really open-ended and detailed way, so that we can go back to our authors with some really strong feedback and help them develop the proposal in any way that it needs to be developed. So yeah, just a quick reflection on the peer review process. So in terms of next steps following receipt of review, your commissioning editor would return the reviewer feedback to you, and they would have a conversation with you around that feedback. So and that kind of process would vary depending on the reviewer recommendations. So for example, if you had a strongly recommends publication, but there were a couple of points that the reviewer had raised that they would like to see developed in the proposal, I would be talking to you as your editor about that feedback, asking you for maybe a kind of brief written response to review. just to understand kind of what developments you plan on making, having kind of taken that review feedback in. Equally, if you were looking at the more kind of revise and resubmit end in terms of recommendations, I'd be working with you on how to approach that. So more than likely, I'd be asking for kind of a really detailed response to review, as well as a revised proposal so that we can look at next steps. So whether that be maybe going back for another round of review, but kind of really working with you in terms of developing the proposal, you know, so that, because often when we get kind of a more constructive review, so with lots more constructive criticism, there is, you know, the reviewer can still see a lot of potential in the project, but there is just a lot more development work that needs to be done for them to be able to say this feels like a really strong contribution to the literature. But that's where your relationship with your commissioning editor comes back in terms of making those changes, and hopefully getting the project to the point where we can then look at offering a contract based on a revised proposal. So just before I go on to this slide, if I maybe bring us back right to the beginning to this slide on the overall process, this kind of brings us up to the contract stage. So it's based on the peer review process, the proposal, and next steps from there that we would then look to make a decision on offering a contract. So that means that we would then kind of formally offer you, you know, send you an offer to publish the work. We would also set things like a delivery date for your overall manuscript, which would go into the contract. And it's at that point we would then consider the project to be kind of a live project that we're working with you on, and that would kind of go into our publishing schedules. And from then, we would then be working with you up until kind of submitting the manuscripts and going into production and beyond. So yeah, just wanted to kind of bring us back to that overall kind of time scale, but then just going back to where I was in the presentation, I just wanted to quickly reflect on how do you select the right publisher. So establishing a relationship with a commissioning editor at a publisher is really important, and you know, throughout the process of not only submitting our book proposal, but going into production and publishing and beyond, it's really important to have that relationship with your editor so that they can support you throughout the publishing process. So in terms of understanding who the right publisher for your project might be, you're wanting to look at kind of who you see out there commissioning and publishing in the areas that you research in. So in terms of any books that you're reading yourself, that you're referring to in terms of your own research, who is publishing those books? Have you got any colleagues that can recommend publishers that they've worked with? Even, you know, having a look on publishers' catalogues on their website, looking at what they've published before, that can really help you have an understanding of kind of if your proposal and your research fits within the scope of that particular publisher's programme. So it's really getting an understanding of whether or not your area of research is something that kind of aligns to the work that publisher is doing. And then making contact with a commissioning editor. So any publisher will have a list of commissioning editors on their website. I think there's a slide coming up which I'll just go through the commissioning editors that work at Emerald. But any kind of publisher's website will have those details. So once you've established which publisher you might potentially want to work with, the next step is then making contact with a commissioning editor, and all commissioning editors will have their kind of list of interests, subdisciplines and areas of research that they're interested in commissioning in. So once you've established your kind of interest at publisher level, you then want to look at making a connection with a commissioning editor, and then you can get that conversation started around what your book writing plans are, what your research is looking at, whether that would be of interest for that commissioning editor, and then looking at that formal kind of proposal submission. So that's a really kind of important way of kind of making sure that you've established a really good working relationship, and you know, you feel supported enough to go right through from that proposal stage through the kind of publishing process. So yeah, as I say, just to quickly kind of give you an overview of the books commissioning team at Emerald. So I'll just start on the top left. That is Charlotte Majorana, who is our Vice President of the Emerald Books team. So she heads the team up. She does also commission herself in kind of general and professional business titles and library studies. And then on the top right-hand side, we have Nick Wallock, who leads our business management and economics side of our programme. So he's kind of my parallel in terms I head up the social sciences side of our programme. He leads on the business management and economics side. But as you can see there, he commissions himself personally in HRM, international business, marketing, organisational behaviour and tourism. And then also in our business management economics team, we have Fiona Allison. So she commissions in accounting, economics, entrepreneurship, management science, operations, research and sustainability. On the bottom left-hand side, we have Iram Sati, who commissions across our business management economics and social sciences sides of our programme, because she commissions in diversity, inclusion and policy, which tend to be quite interdisciplinary areas. So she kind of bridges the two sides of our programme. And then finally, on the bottom right-hand side, we have Kirsty Woods, who is our education publisher. So she sits within the social sciences team, commissioning mainly in education. She does also commission some kind of health and social care titles and media and communication studies. And as I say, I head up the social sciences team and I commission personally in sociology and criminology. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my slides now, and then if anybody has got any questions, then I'm very happy to answer them.
Katie, thank you so very, very much. This was
You're welcome.
tremendous. And I don't know if
Well,
everybody
you're welcome.
caught
And
your...
as I say, I'm happy to share the slides after and follow up with some information. But yeah, if anyone does have any questions, then I'm happy to just hang around for a couple of minutes.
I did see one person ask for your email, and I saw it was at the end of your slide, but I'm putting it in the chat.
Oh, yes, I can put it in the chat. Let me just copy it over now.
That'll work.
There we are. I've just popped it in the chat there.
I'm going to stop the recording. That way, if anybody has a question that they prefer not to be recorded, they can do so.
Great, thank you.
Doing that right now.